My wife's been particularly impressed by what she calls the younger generation who are on the protests and how they're just celebrating Georgian culture, and they'll be dancing in the streets doing traditional Georgian dance and all this stuff, and she's like, this younger generation, man, it's just awesome. So I think that speaks to what you were saying.
Greetings and welcome to Gravity from Above. Today we have an interesting discussion between two expats, expatriates, immigrants who live in Georgia, myself and Marc Jackson. And we are going to discuss what life is like here in Georgia for us. Both of us have lived here a while. I've been here over 5 years. He's been here 8. He's married to a Georgian woman. I haven't been so lucky. That's because I'm a little older too. But I think you'll find our conversation interesting. If you're not a Georgian, you'll learn about Georgia. If you are a Georgian, you'll go, really? They think that about us. And feel free to disagree. This is just our opinions. And if you're wondering about this place called Georgia, about this city called Tbilisi, I have lots of other videos here for you to check out. So do that. And let's go to Vake Park and join Marc for a conversation, shall we?
It's a nice day. Lots of birds out. Yeah. Now, for me, the two biggest culture shocks here for me are, one, summer.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm coming from Alaska. That's
why we go to the village.
Yeah, for me, this is the temperature today, which is probably about 80 degrees in Fahrenheit terms, would be a warm summer day in Alaska. But this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And we haven't got to the kind of days here that just melt your face, So the way I look at it is like in Alaska, January, February were days that I didn't feel inclined to go out a lot. Likewise, July, August here, I don't feel inclined to be out in the heat of the sun. I will go out in the morning. I will go out after 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, but not in the middle of the day. It's just like if I have to go somewhere at 12, I'm like, oh, or 1 or 2. It's like, oh, this is going to be brutal. So that's one thing. The other thing is Christmas. And yeah, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
It's just like there's no such thing as a silent night here. So their Christmas is on the 7th of January. Mm-hmm. So they don't do Western Christmas. Then New Year's comes and they do Western New Year's.
Yes.
And they really blow up the town, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And
especially if you're flat.
And then they have their family kind of like people will often say, well, we have our big meal on New Year's Day.
At midnight.
Yeah. Then there is the Shoba, which is the Georgian Christmas, is on the 7th. Now, I was shocked when I first figured out that there was some place here that was set up like a street fair, and they had all these booths and people outside playing really loud music that I could hear in my house up until about 12:30 every night. And I remember just saying like, oh, come on. It's like the night before Shoba. Certainly, it's got to be quiet here. Nope. It just went on and on. And then people would go on to their service because the service goes all night. And then comes the Georgian New Year, which they get blow a few more fireworks off for.
But it's
just a little coda. So, but the thing that gets me is like, oh, wait a minute. I'm used to this whole build-up in December. I'm used to, for instance, we would have all these feasts and special foods and stuff, whereas the Georgians, if they're religious, they go through a fast period.
Yeah.
So if you invite you can't invite your friends over, because I have enough friends who are religious that it's just like, oh, okay, what's the point of having a feast if I can't serve you like a turkey or something? If it's not a feast if I can't do that. So, and then I realized also we got it back because of the Western New Year's that they celebrate. It means that you have this big celebration before you can break that fast, which is very strange because the old New Year's was on the other side of that. So in New York City, when I lived there, Christmas Eve, that night, was the quietest night of the year. You could get tickets to any Broadway musical that night because nobody was there. It was just like there was very little traffic on the streets. It might be cold, it might be, tolerable, but it was just had this aura over it, which is, I'm figuring out now that if that aura here comes closer to Easter.
Easter is a big celebration.
Exactly. Easter is much bigger than it is in the West.
And I was speaking to Jonathan Pajot, and I was telling him this, and he said, "Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all." Mm-hmm. So, even in Canada, it's an Orthodox thing. Easter is bigger.
Yeah. So, in America, it's been basically, it's on a Sunday, so it's not even a holiday. It's just like, wow, you probably have that day off anyway.
Yeah, Georgians have this thing that, and it's really just imagination. They say we like to celebrate everything twice.
Yeah.
So 2 Christmases, 2 New Years, but
they don't do 2 Easters.
They don't do 2 Easters, but they don't do 2 Christmases either, because they don't celebrate the first one at all.
No.
And the second one is really a celebration. They do celebrate Western New Year, and it's a big one.
Right.
But they don't really celebrate the Orthodox New Year.
Not as much, no.
I've not seen it.
Yeah. I mean, I will see, like I say, it's like the fireworks that didn't get blown off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get that out of your system then. Although the Georgians will set off fireworks at random times of the year. And growing up as I did in California, any use of fireworks is basically completely illegal because the whole state will go up in flames.
Well, the other thing about fireworks with the older Georgian generation, when they hear them at random, their ears really tune in. It's like, is that firework or gunshot?
Exactly.
It's like every Georgian above a certain age just pauses for a minute.
Right.
Fireworks, gunshot, fireworks, gunshot.
Yeah, and there's a different kind of rhythm to those things, too.
And that's what they're looking for.
Right. Because fireworks tend to go boom, 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 whereas gunshots are...
Or...
Exactly.
So, yeah. And the weird thing for me is the Georgian Christmas songs. On the 25th of December. It's like, guys.
Well, that's because the old calendar was the 25th of December, and then it's like a crustal displacement. Everything shifted slightly.
But not the songs.
Yeah. Do you know the reason why the Orthodox won't go with the I think is the Julian calendar the old one and the Gregorian the new one?
I forget which one's which.
Yeah. But do you know why they won't go with the shift? Why the Orthodox don't?
I have a theory.
Why not?
And the theory, there was like a period where Christians were counting the angels on a head of a needle. And when we did this calendar shift, some idiot monk decided that, if we're doing calendar shift, then we need to work out the exact day of Christ's birth, and then extrapolate from there, and they got to the 7th of January, and it's like, this is very short.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Georgian holidays, which I do like. I've come to peace with the fact that I'm not getting my normal Christmases. Someday I will go away during that period for a holiday and get one.
I actually force the issue because 25th of December, Christmas Day, is so embedded in me. That's one cultural thing I'm not letting go of.
Oh, I know.
It's not happening. So, in Georgia, 25th of December, the kids are still at school. They get the day off. They get the getting up at 5 a.m., really excited, opening the presents, experience that I had as a child. I'm not letting go of that, and I want to pass that to my children.
And if I had children, I wouldn't either. So,
So, and we have the full Christmas meal, and we'll try and get family, and they'll turn up at 9 p.m. because they're all working.
Right.
And so it's not perfect. And I'll normally do a traditional English.
Yeah. Well, there was, I left a comment. I made a video on this on my Georgian Crossroads channel. It was my biggest culture shock. And I then left a comment somewhere, I can't remember which social media, and some Russian person said, well, you have a big feast on, we have a big feast, on New Year's Day, so that should be all right. And I'm going like, you have no idea.
No idea.
It's just like we build the whole year up to Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, that basically...
It's massive in the West.
Yeah, if you were to say, what is the year, the culmination of the year? Christmas Day, followed by, a week later, by New Year's, and
But also a week off work.
Yeah, exactly. So you have this period in between there where you're in this festive mood. But here's the thing that Georgians also don't get, and I'm sure this drives you nuts. They don't get the idea that, okay, so they've figured out to play a lot of commercial Christmas crap in their malls. But they start in the middle of November, and they go until the middle of February, and you'll still hear these songs. And I tried to explain to Georgians, see, in America, what we do is on January 2nd, nobody wants to hear a single Christmas song until next December.
Yeah, we're done.
And especially the cheap crap songs. Some new pop singer doing yet one more version of the Holly Jolly Christmas or something. It's just like, no, we're done. But I've been walking literally in February at the Galleria Mall and heard some kind of groovy version of Silent Night, and I'm just going, oh please stop.
But I suspect this is going back to the Georgians celebrate everything twice, but they don't really celebrate it.
Right.
And then because it's not a real pinpointed now we are celebrating.
Right.
It just kind of smudges and blurs and I mean, that's bound to happen.
Yeah.
Except Easter, which is
right. So, Georgians...
That's the celebration.
For Georgians, Easter is the main day of the year.
Yeah.
That is the it's kind of like the whole year kind of revolves around that. And so after Easter, basically, you're ramping up towards summer now. And whereas in America or England, after Christmas, then you hunker down for the winter.
Yeah.
I've always thought, we have these winter songs like Walking in a Winter Wonderland, which have nothing to do with Christmas. And you never hear them in February.
No. Because by February, it's not a winter wonderland anymore. It's just
slush if you get snow.
Where's spring?
So how long have you been here in Tbilisi?
It's complicated. 8 years. Straight. A couple of years here, a couple of years there, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So,
and so
10 years.
So you're married to a Georgian woman.
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been married?
12 years.
12 years. And how long have you been here the longest? Since 8
years.
8 years.
Yeah.
So, and still like it here? Yeah.
It's awesome.
I would ask you to speak up a little more. You're kind of being early morning.
It is early morning.
That's okay. But I can tell I'm going like this. So if I'm going like this, this is going, hey. So actually, it's a pretty good microphone. It picks up quite a bit. It's stereo. And that one's got a microphone too, and that's pretty good. So, yeah. So 8 years in Tbilisi, and
We have a guest.
yeah. See if this woman is coming by with her dog, no doubt.
Of course.
Well, that's an interesting thing, though, about Georgia. You know, this woman comes up, and in America or England, chances are they would see that and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But here, the sense of space is sometimes almost non-existent. You know, you get onto a bus or a metro, or
Oh, there's no personal space on buses.
yeah.
But it also applies to car driving as well.
Oh, exactly.
So as long as you don't hit each other, doesn't matter how close you go.
No, I used to drive in New York City, and when I first started driving here, I was I just said, I'm New York, they are Tbilisi, I am taking charge. And what I noticed is the drivers will sometimes come up to you and just get so close, and what they're trying to do is get you to blink, and if you hesitate a moment, they'll go in. Now, in New York City, no, you don't blink. And if anyone's trying to do that, first of all, that person wouldn't be on the streets very long because they're getting so close. And New York City drivers are very angry. Although I have seen one situation here where some guys got out of a car and piled on someone else in another. But I have the feeling that was more of a personal vendetta or something.
I've seen one road rage incident.
Right.
If you drove like that in England, you'd see a lot of road rage, but no one's bothered about it.
No,
here.
that's the thing, is that even though they are kind of really sneaky, pushy drivers, they're not really angry drivers, by and large. And you'll also see things like, I've seen women here drive in a way I would never see women drive in America, and they'll be just as pushy, and you know, it's like, and if you leave some sort of gap somewhere, they will move into that space. And I figured it out that Georgians are a bit like sharks. They have to always keep moving. So their whole life is like that. They're always moving from one place.
They have to keep moving forwards. Never see a Georgian reversing their car.
No, not reverse on a car. No. Not reverse on the street. And I think they also don't have... See, now, I think in England... You probably are very aware of people behind you and not wanting to inconvenience them. And that's similar in America. So we have this kind of 360. Also, we have like this much space around us. If you get inside of that space, we know. And if a man, for instance, gets inside of a woman's space from behind her, she's like on high alert. And so, but here, it's like no one knows you're behind them.
Because no one looks, because they're going forward.
Right. And it's like if they stop in the middle of the street, you're right behind them, they stop in the middle of the street, you'll never hear anyone go, oh, sorry, Bodishi. It's always like you just have to go around them. They act like nothing happened.
But the worst part is parked cars just pulling out.
Yeah.
And they don't look behind them. I'm like, how are you still alive?
Yeah, but you know, it's the shark thing, though. They're all moving like that. So in a way, even though the Georgians seem like really reckless drivers...
Because they are,
but they're actually very good drivers in the physical sense of they're always kind of... They kind of know, oh, there's someone in the road. You know, you may not think they know that, but they do.
One of the strange things is... old women walking in the middle of the road, if you know what I mean. And they're still alive.
Yeah.
And in any other country, it's like, how come no one has hit them? But Georgians are so used to just random things in the middle of the road, which is another weird...
Oh, exactly. So you get out of the... you have a car?
Yeah.
So you know what happens as soon as you drive out of the city... You start running into cows. Well, not literally running into cows, but, you know, there are cows
Flocks.
just on the streets.
Yeah.
You know, if you go up to Georgian, which is not very far, suddenly there'll be cows right on the main artery of the well, it's not a highway, but of the main road. And no one's trying to, you know, protect you. I've seen them just laying down on bridges up in the mountains.
Yeah.
What has been your, what have been some of your culture shocks here? Things that you go like, I can't believe they do that, or...
I think driving was probably the biggest. Took me about a year to pluck up the courage to start driving when I first moved here. I was terrified. Culture shocks. I feel more at home here than I do in England.
Oh, is that a culture shock?
No, it's the opposite. It's a culture shock when I go back to England.
Yeah.
For me, this is normal, and I think it's because I'm quite emotional.
Right.
And Georgians are quite emotional.
Right.
And we just understand each other.
Right.
Whereas I always felt like an alien in England. I never felt like home.
But I get the feeling a lot of people who live there feel like aliens. That is to say that they are in kind of these bubbles away from each other. They have more personal social distance, in a sense. Does that make sense?
I could do a deep dive on this if you want.
That's the UK. So, but yeah, I think that
trained from birth to be cold-hearted. Let's put it that way. Is the most polite way of phrasing it.
Yeah. Where in America, we are completely obsessed by our rights, and that takes the form of, if anyone thinks you're stepping on their rights, ooh, you know. So here, no one seems to think about that very much. You know, that is to say that what we were just saying about walking down the street, and someone just said, no one would say, "I'm sorry," because it's kind of like there are no rights involved. And it's the same with the traffic. There are no rights involved.
I need to think about that.
Whereas in America, for instance, if you were on a freeway in Los Angeles and acted like a Georgian driver, you would be dead very shortly with some guy who has a gun in his car saying, like, "You are in my way." You know, but just imagine one of the Georgians here jumping a queue in you know, the England somewhere, and just how they would be looked at. Because, you know, I'm sorry, we're in the queue, and you don't have the right to jump in. Whereas here, I look at Georgians as being more like they're all part of the same family. Some parts of the family don't like each other. But it's kind of like no one would apologize in a family for getting to the bathroom before someone else. Does that make sense? That is to say, it's kind of like, oh, you know, I got the last of the Cheerios. No one's going to say, oh, sorry. I mean, at least in a lot of the families I've seen in America.
Well, that's a bad example, actually, when it comes to food.
But yes, because Georgians are very generous with food.
But there's also the last morsel on the plate is like the shame piece. And nobody wants to eat the last piece. So there's always like one piece left in every bowl.
Right.
No. I've really not thought about it in terms of rights, so I'd need to ponder that for a while.
Yeah, well, like I say, in America we're rights obsessed.
Yeah,
and that's why I think about it. And on one hand, that's a good thing to have rights, and on another hand, it's not, because it means everyone is so. Well, this is how you get the victim culture. I'm a victim because my rights weren't upheld. You know, and you also get a lot of this envy culture. Not that Georgia is free from envy or victim status or anything like that. I mean, they have their own version of history, which they've been squat on quite a few times, and they remember that history. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Which is part of what I think is feeding a lot of the hostility right now that's going on. Or hostility is the wrong word. Protests, but they aren't that angry.
It's a party.
Yeah.
Have you been to any of them?
Yeah, I have.
They're fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I was with a Georgian friend the other night, and there was one that came up near my house on Chadchavadze, and we went over there, and he's kind of a philosopher, and he was looking at it all very philosophically, and he says, this is just a party, or not a party. He says, this is just people getting together in the street.
Having fun.
Yeah.
Something you said earlier, Georgians know their history. When I grew up in England, history really wasn't a very important subject. Mm-hmm. In Georgia, it's a very, very important subject.
Oh, yeah.
How is it in America?
I would say when I was young, it was more important. I grew up in California, so I learned a lot about the gold rush history. I learned a lot about the Wild West. In a sense, we started with California and Father Junipero Serra and the founding of the missions, and talked a bit about the natives. And then as it went out, you learned more and more, and eventually learned about America. That kind of education doesn't really exist anymore. Now it's more... I saw a history book. This was back in the aughts, we'll say 2005, just to pick a date. And someone showed me the history book at the local high school. And this was for high school students. And they were, it was not in chronological order. It was not on any one subject. It was like, so feudal Japan here, the Gilded Age of railroads and stuff like that there in America, a bit of England over here, but not chronologically. It was all just mixed up. I think it was by subject, very postmodern. And I thought that was really fascinating because I said, so people are seeing things more like a kaleidoscope now.
Do you think it's a wanton destruction? Because the reason I'm curious, because watching your videos, it's like, this guy's really into culture, like way more than I am. I mean, I've always just avoided the damn thing.
Right.
But one of the things about understanding your history is it gives you roots. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can move countries or whatever, but you've still got those roots, and there's something earthly about that. Is that the right word?
Earthy?
Earthy. It's almost like a physical presence within you.
Now, people don't think about history. The younger people don't, because we're glued to this thing. And this is all about now. This is like, oh, my friend is trying to contact me now. I need to read this now. Oh, that news event is happening now. This is now. That's now. And what's really interesting about this pattern is this now will disappear in a week and be replaced by another now. So, but I don't think that's sustainable. And I think we are looking for another paradigm, because the now-ism, it fits perfectly with consumer culture, but consumer culture has also got a lot of, it's a devil's bargain. So, but, different parts of the world are catching up differently at different times. So Georgia, I tend to look at Georgia as being in the 90s now, cultural. That is to say, they're
I put it in the 50s.
Well, some aspects are. Depends. If you go into a village, they might be in the Middle Ages. Go up to Tusheti or something.
So I spend a lot of, my wife's, we've got a summer house in my wife's village, so I spend a lot of time.
Where is that?
Near, it's near Casper.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I can see what you mean by medieval. But a lot of attitudes here are like the attitudes we had when I was growing up.
So where are we now here? Without going, like I said, without going too far into the weeds on this, what do you think about what's happening now in Georgia? And for those of you who don't live here,
I'll just make another comparison. So
go ahead.
Post Second World War, America went on this infrastructure drive and created all the highways and blah blah blah, and of course the rebuilding of Europe, which was just leveled. Mm-hmm. You can see this rebuilding going on in Georgia now. It's a very similar pattern.
Yeah.
So Yes, I think the fourth turning applies here, but it's out of sync to the west.
Right.
What's going on today regarding the politics and all the protests?
Do you think that's like the 60s in relationship to the West? That is to say, is it that kind of... Do you think that the people on the streets here are that kind of... what is that the artist generation? No, that's the prophetic generation. I'm a little confused.
Okay, I'm confused as well. Let's
Okay.
pass on with the generational stuff.
Okay.
Is it like the hippie movement? I don't think so, because it's very much rooted in Georgian history and the fact that over the last 200 years, Russia has consistently... Can I swear?
Go ahead.
Russia has consistently
Right.
for 200 years.
Right.
And Georgians study their history, so they know this, and
Right.
they're just fed up with it.
Right.
So now we've got this... We've got this new bill coming in, which is
Very similar to certain Russian bills.
very similar to certain Russian bills. And it basically says if you have a foreign income more than 20%, you have to declare it. And they'll put you on a list. And at the moment it's restricted to certain media groups, I think. But I have a foreign income of more than 20%, so I'll be on the
But is
list.
it for individuals or is it for groups?
I'm not sure because I don't know the exact
I was under
details.
the idea that it was for people in organizations.
It might be at the moment,
Yeah.
but creepage. But the problem is not the problem, as they say. The actual problem is the increased Russian influence in Georgia, which the Georgian people do not want. And that's really why they're protesting.
What some of the people out there watching might not know is that after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we first got a wave of about 30,000 Russians who were trying to get away from Putin. Then he called this mobilization of sorts, and then we got
wave.
well. Then there was a wave. Well, we had at least 300,000 people at the border, but out of that, about 100,000 stayed. But people were already leaving from the first group, and many of these people used Georgia as like a jumping off point to other places.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly how I see it.
yeah, and I would say we are below 100,000 now. And my Russian friends here tell me that that's their impression as well. A lot of people have left, and but at the same time, there is now supposedly most of these people are here to get away from
The draft.
or the government or Putin or
Yeah.
whatever. However, they brought a lot of money with them, which
Yes.
changed the value of the lari.
Yes.
And I'm sure you feel it. There was that time when suddenly the prices were all going out. The prices went up because of inflation, but then our respective currencies got weaker at the same time, which was a bit of a shock.
Yeah. Can we describe the waves? Because I found that
Yeah,
fascinating. So the first wave, when the war was first obvious, there are all these like white, tall, stretched out, blonde-haired people with like piercings and tattoos everywhere. They were the first Russians to leave, these kind of goth types. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who are these people? I didn't realize we were getting flooded with Russians at the time.
Right.
I'm just like, where are all these goths coming from?
Right.
The second wave, when he announced the draft, it was all families with dogs.
Yeah, suddenly we have all of these dog places now, places to both house your dogs, to look after your dogs, to operate on your dogs, to feed your dogs. And in fact, Russians here even will take dogs off the street here, which are generally friendly, and adopt them and take them home.
Well, Georgians have been known to do that as well.
Yeah, but Georgians tend to feed them on the streets.
Yeah.
Just like the cats. We have a spot in my Azo, my courtyard, where I know this is where I leave the food for the cats. So, all my meat products go there, except I'll drop the bigger bones down for the dogs in the neighborhood.
Yeah. And I noticed it's like armies of people with these yoga mats wandering around Vodka.
Yeah. Well, also, I've heard that the drug problems got worse.
That's interesting.
Yeah, particularly over near Sololaki. The Russians didn't just come without their own issues. And when you get that many people, what does Georgia have now? Are we about 3.5 to 4 million?
I always go with 4 million.
Yeah. So, but even still, you bring in 100,000 people and add that's a big percentage of the population.
But it's also skewed because they only head for the cities.
Exactly. So we feel it here.
So it's basically Tbilisi, Batumi, as far as I'm aware. They didn't go anywhere else.
No. We wanted the thing that was most familiar, which is city life. And so we tended to get a lot of the hipster Russians. Yeah, and I noticed that among the Georgians, for instance, after that, we started seeing a lot more Georgian girls getting their hair dyed different colors. And I thought that was really interesting, that there was a knock-on effect.
I assume that was the American influence.
It's a combination, because I think a lot of this is coming from the West originally.
Yeah.
And the way it works is in terms of influence, actually Russia gets it before Georgia does. So it's, that Russia has, lots of the same problems of alienation that we have in the West. Georgia, for instance, has some issues, but they don't have near. I've tried to explain I've often been tempted to do a video on my Georgian Crossroads channel. That is, what would happen if Tbilisi turned into New York City overnight, and the things that would change.
You've mentioned this before.
Well, the things that would change is we have these payment machines on the street, and I've used them, and you put money into them and you pay your bills, and or you can do other things. You can pay your gambling debts, which I think is really bizarre, because these are bank machines. But these aren't the cash machines. Mm-hmm. These are just these payment machines. And you'll see people come along, and you see a couple of kind of burly-looking guys and some smaller guy come out and open it up, and you hear, and then they'll pull all the money out and go. In New York,
this is New York or Georgia?
No, this is here.
I've not seen that.
Yeah.
Huh.
But here's the difference. In New York City, those machines full of money on the streets at night would be gone in a week. And guys would come up in trucks, literally. They would simply use what we call channel locks, these big things, snip the chains, throw them in the back of the truck. No, we're not going to worry about the money. We'll get that later. And just take as many as they could. So that's one big change. It's like a few years ago, another big change would be here. When I first moved here, I was living in an apartment in Sabortalo, and this was an old Soviet apartment. So from the front, you're on Vazhapshevela Avenue. So it's this, a pretty busy thoroughfare. But if you go around the back, well, it is black. It's black as pitch when you go around there. There's no lights. Maybe a light will come on when you get near it. But, and then I would go into this dark doorway that's absolutely, looks like the antechamber to hell. It doesn't look like a nice entrance to an apartment building. And then there's an elevator, and you press it, and it goes, and then slowly the door, and then you get into it, and it goes,
Your heart's racing.
In New York City, that would be the most dangerous place in the world. A completely dark place with elevators with people entering. That's just crime, just breeding back there. It would be drugs. It would be guys shooting up heroin. It would be just massively weird. So one of the things is Georgians don't have any fear of that kind of scenario.
Well, not only that, it's the people who live in the block consider, for example, out the back, as part of their own space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of protected in that way.
Yeah.
But also it's full of life. So there'll be children playing there, and there'll be adults having a supra, and you know, it's part of their living space. So it's just completely different.
Exactly. Another thing is just violence. You remember a few years ago there was this poor Australian girl who got killed in Matatsaminda.
Yeah.
And that sent shockwaves through everything. And I'm sitting there saying, I lived in New York City in the 90s, early 90s. And turned out I was there at the worst period in history in New York City for murders. And I saw bodies outside the front of my house. I had a friend who was threatened by drug dealers who saw them do an execution. And this was just daily life. And, didn't stop anyone from coming to New York, but among the expat community, there were people going, it's over, Tbilisi's over. And I'm sort of going, guys, but I was telling the story to a Georgian the other day, and she said, yeah, but you have to understand how shocking that was for us. And that's the thing is, this is such a peaceful city generally. I mean, there are neighborhoods that are probably some guys hanging around you don't want to get in touch with, but not that many.
Yeah, I mean, they did a pretty spectacular job of cleaning up Georgia from the mafia element.
Right. Well, after the 90s wars, evidently the whole Georgian mafia kind of really insinuated itself into many things, many institutions.
Well, after the fall of the Soviet Union, because during the Soviet Union, the black market was the market, the white market. There was nothing there.
Right.
Everything was the black market. And so when the Soviet Union collapses, that becomes official. And of course, it's all controlled by the mafia. So the mafia just go whoosh in power.
Right.
I wasn't here during that time, but again, I've heard a lot of stories. Where was I going with this? Damn it, I've forgotten my thread.
Violence, danger.
Oh yeah, so they cleaned up. They kind of broke a few human rights to clean it up, but some of my Georgian friends have said, not happy with that. That was hell.
Yeah. There was. I don't know if you've ever read Peter Naismith's book Georgia, and he talks about he's updated it over the years. So he talks about when he first came here in the late 80s. And then different periods after that. And he came during the war period, and people were fighting, but one of the Georgians turns to him and says, in about 10 years this will all be okay. And he was right.
Yeah.
The Georgians tend to take I almost look at it, the Georgians have a mythological consciousness. That is to say, they tend to, for instance, immediately turn the past into a kind of mythology.
Huh.
And they tend to that's why they're really into history too, because it's important to them. And when they have the good characters, they really love to push them up and make them. So any artist or writer or dancer or poet who gets any note, they're just going to push that person's memory up and make to help the younger generations to be proud of their culture.
Yeah. My wife's been particularly impressed by what she calls the younger generation who are on the protests and how they're just celebrating Georgian culture, and they'll be dancing in the streets doing traditional Georgian dance and all this stuff, and she's like, this younger generation, man, they're just awesome. So I think that speaks to what you were saying.
They are also the most westernized.
That as well.
And they all have their phones, and I find that the smartphone tends to breed the same behavior everywhere. Although, one good thing I've noticed, for instance, in my backyard, I look down and there's these Georgian ezos, these courtyards. When there's, we have quite a few, not super tall buildings, but there's quite a few people that live in my general courtyard. And they have benches down there. The interesting thing about the benches is they're not in most places, you'll see a bench and it's lined along the side of something. Here, the benches are pulled up so that people are facing each other. And
How strange.
Yeah, so they can talk. And
have supras.
Actually, there was some older men were having a supra. There's a table out there, too. We're having a supra in the evening the other night. But among the teenagers who sit out there, and they sit out there and smoke, and I'm not a big fan of smoking, but I would say this, I see they use the smoking as a time to talk. And that, if you were to say what's healthier, the smoking and a time to talk, or time spent alone in your room just scrolling on your smartphone, I go smoking and a time to talk. You may die sooner, but at least you will have had conversations with human beings. But no, the problem in America is you have every child has a smartphone. You know, like 11-year-olds will, if they don't have a smartphone by that time, they will be mercilessly teased by their peers. And
my children don't have one yet, but
how old are they?
Feeling the pressure. 10 and 8.
Yeah.
I'm really feeling the pressure because most of their friends have smartphones now.
Right. Well, the problem is this also creates a kind of behavior. Now, for instance, I often tell my friends I have Facebook, and they will tell me why, because it's so old-fashioned in America. But I say, well, here's the thing. It's one of the only apps I use on my smartphone because Georgians don't use Facebook the same way Americans do. Georgians use it for instance, they'll send me a little text message and I'll get a little ding if they're on their way or whatever. They don't use it for catching up with each other. They'll post photos, and the whole point of posting the photos is to get likes and all sorts of people slathering praise over the picture of your daughter. Like there are pictures of children on Facebook that in America would be considered, oh my God, what if the wrong people are looking at this?
Yeah, they don't have that here.
No. And in fact, you'll often see, this is a very interesting thing here, you'll often see people doing touching behaviors here that in America would be considered criminal practically. Like older men with their arm around a younger girl, and it's their cousin or somewhat close, and no one is doing anything. But I often think, Georgia is a very touchy culture.
It's it's back to that body space and car space. It's kind of the same.
Yeah, and you'll see teenage boys hanging around in the metro or something, and they'll have their arms all over each other, or even holding hands or something.
Yeah.
And if you were to suggest, however, that there was something going on here more than friendship, you would probably not make it out of that metro car.
No.
Without some bruised body parts.
Because that's still a big insult.
That is. So, but the strange thing is, the more that the modern aspect of that comes in, the more that would change.
Or it might do the opposite and put people's back up and create a resistance.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a very strange... people often will look from the outside and see one thing. I recognize, it's just like, okay, this is this. I will, when I greet men, I'll, touch on the side of the cheeks, kind of, you're kind of kissing, but you're kind of not. And
yeah, sometimes it's an air kiss.
Yeah, exactly. But in America, that seems odd.
It felt odd when I first... that was a culture shock for me when I first came to Georgia and men kissing each other. I'm like, that's weird.
Right.
I got used to it so quickly, though. It's just normal now.
Yeah. Well, I was used to it because I've spent a certain amount of time in France, where that thing isn't
still exists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, same with Italy, I think.
Yeah. Whereas if you go to another culture like Poland, the men will do things like kiss the woman's hand and stuff like this, which in America, that's like, what are you doing? It's just like, that's too much. Women don't want that. And, but then again, women in America and women here are two really different subjects,
Yeah, I think women here know what they want and women in America don't.
Yeah.
But they imagine they know what they want.
Yeah.
And then when they get it, they're like,
Okay. Well, Mark, it's been good talking to you. And
you've put your official voice on again.
Yeah. And yeah, it's time to wrap it up. So.
Okay.
Thanks to Marc Jackson for coming along and talking with us about his experiences in Georgia and contrasting our views of what it's been like living here. He's from the UK, from England, and has been here, and he feels at home here, as do I. I really love living in Georgia. And even though right now we're going through some political turmoil, it doesn't change anything. Georgia is still Georgia, and for that, I am very grateful. If you'd like to support the channel, well, there are ways you can do it. Subscribe. I need more subscribers here. I don't make any money from this channel, so if you wish to support the channel, there is a PayPal link below, and I can really use your support, and because times are tight, and if you've got a little extra money, you know, maybe buy one less coffee and throw in a few dollars for me. And yeah, hit like. That helps the algorithm somehow. It's funny. I see the same video over and over and over. It's like people just come to Georgia. They go through the same sites. There's a triangle down at the bottom of the city in the old town, and Mother of Georgia statue, Liberty Square. They just go through this triangle. They do the same things over and over, and they get thousands and thousands of views. My videos don't. Maybe it's because I'm trying to keep it real. Or as they say back in the state, keep it 100%. So, thank you. And as the Georgians say, Droebit. If you're Georgian, you know what that means. If you're not, I'll tell you later.